Hello, everyone, and welcome to this short presentation from the Future Work Forum. This is a Future Work Forum Insight, and the title of the presentation is Aware, Don't Care. And the reason for the title will become clear very shortly. The subtitle, however, is Addressing Toxic Behaviors, and it asks the question, can motivational interviewing offer a pathway to change? And so what I'd like to do is to take you through the background to asking this question. And so the what of the discussion is that last year I published a book called Toxic Humans, and this looked at systemic toxic collusion in organizations and also at the behaviors of certain individuals that could be characterized as toxic. And it's led me to think about how I might develop ideas to help people deal with toxicity, of course, with friends and colleagues to sort of think this through. And where I started was to consider self-awareness. In other words, people who exhibit toxic behaviors, who perhaps aren't aware of the impact that that has on people. Um, to me, a starting point would be self-awareness, and I've quoted Dr. Tasha Eurich in my book Toxic Humans, and Dr. Eurich very usefully groups people into three particular or possible categories in terms of self-awareness. The first is called lost causes, and these are people who have no self-knowledge and no motivation to acquire it. The next group, and this is where this presentation gets its title, is the group called Aware Don't Care. And these are people who are very aware of the impact that they're having on others, and that could be that they know that they intimidate, that they bully people, and that they have a negative impact on others, but they have no intention of changing. Um, why? Because they think that this behavior, which some might say was counterproductive and borderline abusive, is actually getting them what they want. And so they see no reason to change. And then the third group is the nudgeable group. And these are people who genuinely want to be better, but they don't know how to change. And so Dr. Urich suggests that an approach that combines feedback with compassion can be very successful with this kind of person in the nudgeable group. Now, something that we often say in our programs is that working on self-awareness is a good place to start when it comes to leadership development. And what I'm going to share with you now is something that may be very familiar to many observers, and that is the Johari window, which is a very useful tool designed to help people to think about self-awareness. And as you can see, it's a 2x2 where in the top left-hand corner, that quadrant indicates all of those things about you that you know about and that others know about. So this is the open self quadrant. And then on the top right-hand side, called the blind self. These are things that you don't really know about yourself. You're not aware of about yourself, but others are. And the route to understanding and getting insights into that, of course, is through feedback. And then in the bottom left-hand quadrant, we find the hidden self, which these are things that are known to you but not known to others. And again, it's the route to sharing that is around self-disclosure. And then finally, we have the bottom right-hand quadrant, which is about self-discovery. And these are things that are not known to us and not known about us by others, and may come out, if you like, in moments of extreme, potentially extreme trauma, for example. You may discover reservoirs of resilience and the ability to react, for example, in an emergency situation, which you never really thought you would be able to do. So it's something that very often comes out in extreme moments. Uh, in terms of the exercise that we ask people to do, typically we might show them a whole range of adjectives, as you can see here, which I've taken from my book Expert Humans, which I wrote in 2021. And then we invite people to think about those adjectives and about whether they would describe themselves in this way by plotting those adjectives onto these four quadrants. And of course, they can use any words that they like. They don't have to be the words that we share with them. It's just to get them underway. And it's part and parcel of helping that process of building self-awareness. Okay, so what? So what? So what could be the problem then when people are actually resistant to considering change? So if somebody doesn't feel the need to change, and in this particular instance, I'm thinking of people who have a negative impact on others because of their behavior that can be characterized as somewhat toxic. How can we respond? Well, I think we should aim to persist with an empathetic and compassionate approach, try to understand what it is that is behind what makes them behave in that particular way. And I was thinking that perhaps part of this approach, at least one thing that we could consider, is the whole area of motivational interviewing. And so when we think about motivational interviewing and thinking about the darker side of the human character, for example, how can we leverage motivational interviewing to perhaps help us to make some progress? Well, I'm very much indebted to Elizabeth Hartney, who's produced these six principles of motivational interviewing, which I'll go through quickly in just a moment. The six are to express empathy, develop discrepancy, avoid argument, roll with resistance, support self-efficacy, and assessing confidence. So if we take each of these one by one, expressing empathy is about meeting the person in an empathetic way. So you will express acceptance of the situation, but not necessarily agreement. And this is where, no surprise, I'm sure to you, that skillful reflective listening is going to be fundamental. We have to be accepting of ambivalence as well. Someone who perhaps is thinking about whether to change or not to change uh, in that ambivalent state, which is very normal. And the reason for that is that people get very attached to the behaviors that they've developed maybe over a long period of time. So an empathetic, non-judgmental approach is really important. And then um, developing discrepancy. And this is where we work with the person to try to elicit the person's concerns. In other words, um, discrepancy between current behaviors and the goals that people might have is something that can motivate change. And this is where we'd be asking, so what's good about this behavior? And maybe what's not so good? And we invite the person to present their reasons, their own reasons for change, because they need to hear it for themselves. They need to hear themselves voice the reasons. Very importantly, we need to avoid argument, uh, avoid disputing what the person is saying. Uh, Rather better to perhaps suggest that you've misunderstood their readiness for change, or perhaps there's another issue that hasn't been shared. So arguing is counterproductive because confrontation doesn't motivate people. And the important thing is that people's attitudes are generally shaped by their words, not yours. So something to bear in mind. That said, we also need to think about rolling with resistance. So if you start in the conversation to meet resistance, you can perhaps uh, as I say, um, respond in a particular way to say, well, it seems perhaps that I'm not understanding the whole issue here, or this seems very important to you. Can you tell me a bit more about that? In other words, you're inviting new perspectives rather than imposing yours. So the choice and the control is on the side of the interviewee. They have the choice, they have the control. In other words, they themselves are a valuable resource for finding solutions to their own problems. We also want to do some very active work around supporting self-efficacy. And what this is about is helping the person to believe that change is possible, because that hope, that aspiration, that optimism is a motivator. So we've said that the person is responsible for making decisions, for controlling what happens, but choosing and then carrying out the actions to change is the responsibility of the person. We know that hope lies in a range of alternative approaches which could be available, and we can go through those and explore them with the interviewee. As you can see here, people who successfully change may often use a wide variety of behavioral techniques to help to make that change. Then we have assessing confidence, where an early step in the process of motivational interviewing is determining the person's concept of self-efficacy. So how ready do they feel to make the change? Are they equipped to make that change? And you can ask them to indicate to you on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you will make this change? You'll be able to make this change. And 2 could be not confident, all the way through to very confident, which might be a 9 or a 10. And so if the person happens to answer, well, 2, then a really helpful response is going to be, well, what would it take to move that to a 5? You probably will make more progress doing that than saying, or trying to encourage the person by saying, you can do it. That probably won't be as useful. So in terms of now what, well, I hope what I've shared so far is food for thought. Quite clearly, there is a connection to be made here with coaching, or a relationship to be established with coaching. I just wanted to share perhaps that when we think about coaching, it has a very diverse application in comparison to motivational interviewing, which we'll look at in just a second. So coaching can include life coaching, executive coaching, wellness coaching, and other forms of coaching. And the idea, or the goal, is to help individuals to set and achieve specific goals, or to overcome challenges. And that's often, particularly in the business context, about developing skills, enhancing performance, or perhaps even clarifying their vision, maybe establishing their own purpose more clearly. And coaches typically work, therefore, on goal setting, creating action plans, and these types of things. And very often, they may well adopt techniques that include elements of motivational interviewing. In terms of flexibility, coaching tends to be perhaps more flexible, maybe, and it may or may not involve deep exploration of underlying motivation. And that's what marks motivational interviewing out as being quite specific. It is about an exploration of underlying motivation. That is very much an important aspect of MI. So with coaching, it's generally more forward focused and action oriented. That's not to say that MI is not, but coaching takes this as one of its core drivers. MI, on the other hand, we need to recognize that it's a therapeutic technique that's been primarily used in mental health and addiction settings. What it seeks to do is to focus on resolving ambivalence. Will I change? Will I not change? And increasing motivation for making the change. So MI is all about enhancing that individual's intrinsic motivation to change. It's about encouraging them to explore, maybe even guiding them to explore. Okay. So something that appeals to me very much about motivational interviewing is the fact that it's based on empathy, it's collaboration that's really important. It's about supporting people. It's very client-centered, very interviewee-centered. And as you probably would have guessed, it will use open-ended questions, a lot of affirmation, a lot of invitation to reflect, and then summaries too to help people to see how far they've progressed in the conversation and what has been uh, set out as a kind of agreement, at least a working agreement. And the last thing is that motivational interviewing has been extensively studied. It is evidence-based, and it is, as I'm sure you know, often used for behavior change, yeah, relating to substance use, health-related issues, and of course some uh, more broadly lifestyle changes. So perhaps in conclusion, then, it's worth recognizing that motivational interviewing is a specific therapeutic method used to enhance that motivation for change. Coaching is rather broader, and it may incorporate motivational interviewing as one of the tools that are used. So, as I mentioned earlier, motivational interviewing is more about guiding the person, helping the person to explore their own reasons for change. Um, Whereas coaching might involve something that's a bit more structured and that has some clear goals and action steps. Again, not to say that motivational interviewing couldn't include that, but the focus is slightly different. And with motivational interviewing, it is that uh, enhancing of the motivation for change that is so important. And that's the reason why I was curious as to whether motivational interviewing could be used in a leadership development context to be able to explore with people who have and know they have difficulties in interpersonal relationships. They have a certain impact on others which they don't wish to have, and so helping them to find the motivation to change, I think, could be very useful. And I'm still learning about this, and I'm very keen to discuss aspects of it with like-minded colleagues and friends. So please feel free to reach out, get in touch. But in the meantime, let me just thank you for listening, and I hope that we can continue the conversation um, in the months and years to come. So thank you very much.